Well, the Conservative MP, Rehman Chishti, recently quit his post as the Prime Minister's special envoy on freedom of religion in protest at the handling of the internal market bill. He said that as a former lawyer, values of respecting rule of law are dear to him. He's with us now. I want to talk to you about that. But first, let me just ask you, if I may, about lockdown and whether or not we could be going into a second lockdown. There's some suggestions via the 1922 committee that the House of Commons should have a final veto on whether or not lockdowns happen in the future. What do you think?
Well, look, can I just say, the public have sacrificed so much with their freedoms in these difficult and challenging times, and they elect their members of parliament to make decisions on their behalf, knowing what the situation is that they face on the ground. And on this specific issue, and it's linked to why I resigned, I believe in parliamentary sovereignty. So when we are dealing with individuals' freedoms and restricting their freedoms, then I think on that basis, for me, it would make common sense to have those matters being dealt with by Parliament and voted on by Parliament. And I think you're referring also to specific statutory instruments. At the moment, a lot of this stuff that's going through, with regards to the bubble of six or the other measures, what one has to wear, face masks, is dealt with by statutory instruments. And they're not voted on, or debated on by members of Parliament. So I think, if the proposal put forward, and I haven't spoken to Sir Graham Brady yet on his proposals, if they then ensure that Parliament, Chairman of the 1922 committee, if they then ensure that there is parliamentary scrutiny, and for me, parliamentary scrutiny leads to better legislation, then that's something which I would look at very closely.
Do you support a second lockdown?
Do I support a second lockdown? I'm not a scientist. I know individuals who've lost loved ones in these difficult and challenging times. And look, the government is in a situation where if they do something, they're damned. If they don't do something, they're damned. I think you have to go with the scientific evidence that's there before the government when it makes those decisions. I don't sit on COBRA meetings, but I would say the public would understand. We've lost, over 30,000 people in our country. And on that basis, they expect the government to take the best possible decision, taking the evidence available to them at the time. So I would say if it's done in a way which ensures that people are kept safe, then on that basis, and we've explained why we're doing it, and it's gone through parliamentary scrutiny, then I think our great British public, they have suffered a lot in these challenging times. And I think if it's done in the right way, then in a specific way, looking at the challenges and needs that we face, looking at what's going on in France next door, looking at what's going on in Spain with the high rates coming in, then on that basis, I think the public would support initiatives which would help keep them safe.
Why did you resign?
Okay, I'm a Brexiteer, and I campaigned to deliver a Brexit. And Brexit was about sovereignty for many people. Brexit meant many things to many people, but for me, it was about sovereignty, respecting the will of the public in delivering that. And so when I then see a minister, off the Crown at the dispatch box on a Tuesday and on the 8th, and saying the measures that were put forward in this bill, would break international law in a specific, limited way, a Conservative minister saying that at the dispatch box, I find that completely unacceptable. I am a lawyer. I prosecuted cases. I defended cases. And the respect for the rule of law, there is no compromise for me on that. Because if you start compromising with that principle, then the question then is, which other laws can you move away from? And on that basis, having dealt with the cases in courts and used to say respect for the rule of law, then if we then are in a position of saying to individuals, well, we can move away from those rules of laws, and at the same time we're dealing with difficult, challenging circumstances with people's freedoms and asking them to do the right thing, and yet we've got a minister at the dispatch box saying, well, actually, you can, in specific limited circumstances, you can break international law. So for me, on the point of principle, no compromise on adherence to the rule of law was one. Secondly, in my work as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for freedom of religion or belief, I deal with countries around the world. I helped set up a 31-member state alliance on freedom of religion or belief. And now we used to say to states, hey, comply with Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where people can choose whatever faith they want to be or have none. And we go to the Security Council, we go to the UN, we go to the Human Rights Council, we go to the OSCE. Hey, guys, do the right thing. But then they say, well, actually, what about you guys? You've just looked at measures which have, and would have enabled ministers, not Parliament, to move away from what they had initially signed up. And for me, Kay, look, politics, you're here today, gone tomorrow. But if I give you my word today, I have to comply with that. So I then felt I could not support the bill as it was at the time.
And what about the amendment that's been put forward by Bob Neal? And just to clarify for our viewers, that means that Parliament will be able to decide what happens.
Well, look, Kay, I said to the government on the Sunday before I resigned, will they consider this amendment? Because this is about parliamentary sovereignty. And I was told no. And the amendment that Bob Neal puts means that Parliament, because the measures that were put in the bill before would have meant that it would have deferred the authority to breach international law, if we came to that, to ministers. No disrespect to any minister from any government. It was Parliament that agreed this treaty, the withdrawal agreement. Then it should be Parliament. If in exceptional circumstances, if the EU is behaving in an outrageous manner, then on that basis...
What would constitute outrageous?
Well, I think it's outrageous behaviour. If measures were put in place which would jeopardise our union, bringing a hard border in the Irish Sea, and the EU have behaved in a manner, let me give you an example. If Michael Barnier negotiates in the way that he's done before in comments, where he said those who've negotiated or who've campaigned for Brexit, there is a special place in hell for them. That was said about a year ago. But that, as a lawyer, tells me the motive and intention of the way somebody is going into those negotiations. So this amendment would then mean, which I pushed for, supported Bob Neal, it's a brilliant amendment, would mean that Parliament will then have the final say, if we are going to depart from the agreement. So I was told no, then I resigned. 3 days later, the government accepts it. And on that basis, look, if my resignation has enabled the government to do the right thing. Well, I love what I did. And I think, all those that were, working with me thought I did a good job. But I think there's certain things in life which are far more important than jobs and titles. And for me, it's, you had to go in line with the principles that you advocate around the world and what you practice.
But you're a lawyer, you should have negotiated rather than stepped down, some might say.
Well, the question is, I asked the government on the Sunday, they said no. And on that basis, I tried. Look, I'm a pragmatic realist, okay? Let me be completely frank with you. I used to work with Benazir Bhutto as a special advisor, and we used to look at transition to democracy in Pakistan with the military, go to meetings at the Foreign Office with Jack Straw, David Miliband. And she said to me, Rowan, it's better to have a bird in hand than two in the bush. So on that basis, with this amendment...
I think she's the only person that said that.
But she said that to me, and that would mean, I'd rather have this amendment than have nothing at all. But when I was told, can't have the amendment, and this is about parliamentary sovereignty, so you pushed hard. And then the second point you say, should have tried harder. The government had won by 77 votes on the vote that took place on Monday. I want to win the argument for parliamentary sovereignty. Can I guarantee that 40 MPs would vote against the government on this amendment? I can't. So on that basis, when the government then says they compromise, they listen, and they say, OK, parliamentary sovereignty and full debate, not what they were proposing before, 90 minutes. A statutory instrument, 90 minutes. Minister takes, is on their feet for half an hour. And what do you have for MPs to debate? So parliamentary sovereignty, we got that. And in life, you have to be pragmatic and realistic and give and take. And now that's how we got
Briefly, before I let you go, would you be happy to work closely with the Prime Minister again?
I think the Prime Minister is amazing, and I've worked with him before. Let me give you one final thing before I go with the Prime Minister, what's his great quality he has. When I was working on the Dash campaign to change terminology in 2015, I did not know Boris Johnson. I raised the point in Parliament, and that Sunday when he was Mayor of London, I get a phone call saying, Rehman, I'm doing an article for The Telegraph on terminology and counter-narrative, and I saw your question in Parliament to Philip Hammond, the Foreign Secretary. Can you explain to me the different aspects that you're pushing for? And because I want to know. And then he listened. Next day, in that article, he then, commented what I was saying. And that shows to me as somebody who listens, who engages, and I have huge admiration and respect for him.
You can't appreciate all of the terminology that the Prime Minister has used in his previous articles in The Telegraph.
But look, what I would say specifically on that, I know the one that you're referring to, Kay. I'm a son of an imam. I'm a son of an imam. My father's an imam. My grandfather's an imam. My uncles were imams. And so I know what the Prime Minister stands for, and having done community engage with him around the country. And so I know from him, he has huge amount of respect for people of all faith and none. But coming back to your point is with regards to what I work with the Prime Minister. He gave me a chance to serve our country on religious freedom, having worked with him on areas where he's listened to my advice and got things done. So, for me, huge amount of respect for the Prime Minister, and look forward to working with him on delivering our manifesto going forward.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme this morning.